At 7 a.m., my unemployed sister showed up at the apartment I rent from my parents and said, "I'm moving in." Mom added, "We're doubling your rent to cover our expenses." When I said I'd move out, they laughed. So I took all the furniture. My life was practically perfect, or so I thought. I had a great job, a cozy apartment from my parents, and a future I was building brick by brick. Then, one terrifying morning, my world was ripped apart when my unemployed sister showed up on my doorstep, and my parents called to casually inform me they were doubling my rent to accommodate her. Before everything went sideways, I had a life I was genuinely proud of. I was a social media marketer at Digital Pulse, this amazing agency downtown. Our office was super sleek with glass partitions, collaborative spaces, and a break room that had everything from espresso to kombucha. My desk faced a wall of windows, giving me this incredible view of the city every single morning. It was inspiring, and it made me feel accomplished. My salary was decent, allowing me to cover my expenses and still stash away 20% each month for my future home fund. I'd been at the company for 4 years and had just been put in charge of our biggest client, a national fitness chain. My boss had even hinted at a promotion, which would mean a 15% raise. And my apartment? Oh, that was my sanctuary. It was a 1-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, close enough to work but far enough to escape the city's hustle. When my parents bought the building 5 years ago, they offered me one of the units at a below-market rate. It felt like such a blessing at the time. I poured my heart into making that place my own. The living room had a plush sectional sofa I'd paid off over 6 months, a coffee table I'd refinished myself, and bookshelves filled with my psychology books and vinyl records. My kitchen, though small, had quality appliances. My Vitamix blender was a splurge after my first bonus, and the espresso machine was a birthday gift to myself. My bedroom was my true haven, with a memory foam mattress and sheets so soft they practically guaranteed perfect sleep. Every single item had a story, representing years of careful selection and financial planning. My financial goals were clear: a down payment on my own place within 3 years. I was even browsing real estate listings, just getting familiar with the market, dreaming of the day. My family, though, that was always complicated. Especially with my sister, Stephanie, who is 3 years younger than me. She was always the favorite, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. I worked part-time jobs all through college and graduated with minimal debt. Stephanie. She went to an expensive private university, changed majors 3 times, and our parents covered every penny. This pattern just continued into adulthood. When she needed a car, they bought her one. When I needed one, I took out a loan. When Stephanie lost her job, she moved back home rent-free. When I was laid off early in my career, my parents offered me a loan, with interest. Don't get me wrong, I love my family, but I'd long ago accepted that there were different rules for us. I'd made peace with it by building my own independent life, one where I didn't need their support or approval. The apartment arrangement had seemed like a rare win for me, a chance to benefit from family connections while still maintaining my independence. But there were warning signs, subtle cracks in my carefully constructed equilibrium. 2 weeks before, Stephanie had texted me out of the blue, asking how I was. Unusual. Then my mom called to casually mention Stephanie and her boyfriend broke up, and she quit her job at the boutique. I remember feeling this uneasy twinge when Mom said, "Your sister is going through such a difficult time right now. Family needs to stick together during hardships." I nodded sympathetically, completely oblivious to the ominous foreshadowing. The night before everything changed, I was lying in bed, scrolling through Pinterest, saving ideas for a kitchen backsplash project. I had no idea that within 24 hours, my plans, my peace, everything, would be shattered by a knock at the door. The knocking started at exactly 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because my alarm was set for 7:30, and that insistent pounding dragged me out of sleep half an hour early. Disoriented, half asleep, I stumbled to the door in my pajamas, hair sticking out everywhere, expecting a package or maybe a maintenance emergency. When I swung the door open, there she was, Stephanie. 2 massive suitcases, a duffel bag, her designer purse. Her perfectly styled hair was in a messy ponytail, and her eyes were puffy, either from crying or lack of sleep. "Hey, sis," she said, her cheerfulness forced, not quite reaching her eyes. "Surprise. I'll be staying with you for a while." I stood frozen. My brain was lagging. "Stephanie, what are you talking about? What are you doing here so early?" She just pushed past me, rolling her luggage into my living room. "Mark and I broke up. He cheated on me, can you believe it? After 2 years. And then my boss was being completely unreasonable about me needing some time off, so I had to quit. I just can't deal with toxic work environments on top of heartbreak." I closed the door slowly, trying to gather my thoughts. "I'm sorry about Mark and your job, that's really tough. But Steph, this is a one-bedroom apartment. There's no space for you here. Why didn't you go to mom and dad's? Stephanie flopped dramatically onto my sofa. Their house is being renovated, remember? The guest room is completely torn apart. Besides, dad snores so loudly now. And mom's on this health kick, only kale and quinoa. I'd go crazy there. She looked around my apartment, admiringly. This place is perfect. You've always had great taste, ally. I winced at the childhood nickname I'd outgrown years ago. Stephanie, I work from home 2 days a week. I need my space. This really wouldn't work. Just then, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. A cold dread settled in my stomach as I answered. Allison, your sister is there, right? Mom didn't wait for confirmation. I want you to make her feel welcome. She's going through a very difficult time, and she needs family support right now. Mom, I understand she's having a hard time, but my apartment is too small for 2 people. Maybe we could help her find a place of her own. Or she could stay with Jessica, I suggested, thinking of Stephanie's friend with a 2-bedroom. Jessica isn't family, my mother replied, sharp. Family takes care of each other. Allison, your sister needs you right now. This is not the time to be selfish. I took a deep breath, moving to my kitchen so Stephanie wouldn't overhear. It's not about being selfish, Mom. There is literally no space here. I don't have an extra bedroom. She can sleep on the couch. It's temporary until she gets back on her feet. My mother's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion, it was an expectation. How temporary are we talking? I asked, watching Stephanie start arranging her toiletries on my coffee table. As long as she needs, Mom replied vaguely. Now stop being difficult. I raised you better than this. Do I need to get your father involved? The threat was implicit. My father would take an even harder line, and any protest from me would be labeled ungrateful and selfish. I'd been through this routine enough times to know the script. Fine, I conceded, the word heavy with defeat. She can stay for now, but we need to figure out a more permanent solution soon. That's my good girl, Mom said, instantly warm again. Call me if you need anything. Love you both. After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen, watching Stephanie make herself at home, rearranging my throw pillows, placing her framed photos next to mine. A wave of invasion washed over me. I swallowed it down. The couch pulls out into a bed. We'll need to put it back during the day so I can work. I have meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays from home. Stephanie barely looked up. Actually, I was thinking I'd take the bedroom. The living room gets so much light in the morning, and you know I'm not a morning person. Plus, I have all these clothes that need to be hung up. I stared at her, disbelief rising. Stephanie, this is my apartment. I am not giving up my bedroom. She looked at me with that same expression she'd used on our parents for years, a perfect blend of hurt and indignation. Wow, ally, I just lost my boyfriend and my job. I'm at my lowest point, and you can't even make a small sacrifice to help me. The living room is bigger anyway. I held my ground. You can have the couch. That's already a compromise. The standoff might have continued, but my phone buzzed. A text from my mother, * be kind to your sister. Remember all the times she was there for you, * I couldn't recall these supposed instances, but I knew this battle wasn't worth fighting. Not today. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. You can use the living room, but we need to establish some ground rules. Stephanie's face instantly brightened. You're the best sister ever. This is going to be so fun, like when we were kids and shared a room. I didn't have the heart to remind her those days had been far from idyllic, with her constantly borrowing my things and complaining to our parents whenever I tried to set boundaries. As she cheerfully continued unpacking, I texted my friend Laura, * Stephanie just moved in. No warning, no choice. Send wine and patience, * Laura's response was immediate, * oh no. Nightmare flashbacks to college roommate days. Coming over tonight with emergency supplies. Hang in there, * looking at my sister singing to herself as she claimed more and more of my space, I wondered how long I could actually hang in there before something had to give. The first week of cohabitation with Stephanie was every bit as challenging as I'd feared. While I maintained my regular schedule, Stephanie typically slept until noon. This wouldn't have been an issue, except her presence had transformed my once peaceful living room into a bedroom, fashion boutique, and makeup studio all rolled into one. On Wednesday morning, I had an important video call with clients. I had to carefully angle my laptop camera to avoid showing the blanket strewn across my sofa, the makeup scattered on my coffee table, and clothes hanging from every doorknob and chair back. When my boss commented on my unusual background, I mumbled something about redecorating, promising myself I'd address it with Stephanie that evening. But addressing anything with my sister proved nearly impossible. When I suggested she look for a new job, she sighed dramatically and said she was taking time to heal. When I asked her to clean up, she promised she would, but somehow never got around to it. When I mentioned the increase in my grocery bill, she reminded me she was going through a trauma and needed comfort food. By the end of the first week, my carefully stocked refrigerator had been raided. My meal prep containers were mysteriously empty. The expensive specialty coffee beans I treated myself to once a month were nearly gone. Even my hidden stash of dark chocolate had been discovered and depleted. "Stephanie," I said one evening, finding her wrapped in my favorite throw blanket, watching reality television at full volume. "We need to talk about some house rules." She looked up, clearly annoyed at having her show interrupted. "Can it wait until commercial break?" "No, it cannot. I've been trying to talk to you all week." I sat down across from her and pulled out a notepad where I'd written some basic guidelines. First, we need quiet hours for when I'm working or sleeping. Second, we need to discuss shared expenses like groceries and utilities, which have gone up since you arrived. Third, we need to talk about personal space and belongings. Stephanie rolled her eyes. "Are you seriously giving me a roommate contract? I'm your sister, not some random person off Craigslist." "That's exactly why we need clear boundaries," I explained, trying to keep my voice level. "Because we're sisters, things can get complicated if we don't communicate clearly." She laughed. Actually laughed, and turned back to her show. "You've always been so uptight, ally, just relax. This isn't forever." "How long is it then?" I pressed. "Have you started looking for jobs or apartments?" She sighed heavily. "Can you stop pressuring me? I told you I'm taking time to process my breakup. Besides, Mom and Dad said I could stay here as long as I need to." That was the moment something clicked for me. "Wait, what exactly did Mom and Dad tell you about staying here?" Stephanie shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Just that you had plenty of space and could use the company, and that since they own the building, it's basically like staying with family anyway." My blood began to boil. Without another word, I stepped onto my small balcony and called my parents. My father answered on the fourth ring. "Dad, did you and Mom tell Stephanie she could move in with me indefinitely, without even asking me first?" There was a pause before he responded. "Allison, your sister is going through a difficult time. The apartment is plenty big enough for both of you, temporarily. We thought you would want to help family. But it's not temporary, is it? She has no plans to look for a job or her own place, and she's not contributing anything to the household." My father's tone hardened. "Your mother and I give you a significant discount on rent for that apartment. Many people would be grateful for such an arrangement." The implicit message was clear: the apartment wasn't really mine. It was a family asset that could be reallocated as my parents saw fit, regardless of the fact that I'd been paying rent and building my life there for years. "I am grateful," I said carefully. "But I also need to be able to live my life. Stephanie is not respecting my space or my things." "You've always been the responsible one, Allison," my father said, his voice softening slightly into what I recognized as his manipulation tone. "Stephanie needs that stability right now. Just give her some time to get back on her feet. Be the big sister." By the time I ended the call, my frustration had turned to resignation. This was the same dynamic that had played out throughout our childhood, with Stephanie's needs always taking precedence over mine. The situation continued to deteriorate over the following weeks. Stephanie invited friends over without warning, sometimes while I was in the middle of work calls. She borrowed my clothes without asking and returned them stained or stretched out. The water bill doubled as she took 40-minute showers twice a day. The electricity bills spiked from her constant use of my styling tools and electronics. My peaceful morning routine was shattered by having to navigate around her belongings. My evening relaxation was impossible with her friends laughing loudly or her phone conversations continuing late into the night. My weekend plans were derailed by her sudden emotional crises that required my attention and support. The impact on my work began to show. I missed a deadline for the first time in my career. My boss called me in for a check-in, concerned about my sudden drop in performance. My promotion prospects, once so promising, now seemed to be slipping away. "Is everything okay at home?" my boss Diane asked during our one-on-one meeting. I considered lying but opted for a simplified truth. "Family issues. My sister is staying with me temporarily, and it's been an adjustment." Diane nodded sympathetically. "Family can be complicated. Just don't let it affect your work for too long. The Henderson account is too important." That evening, I found myself staying late at the office, reluctant to return to my own apartment. This had become a pattern, finding excuses to be anywhere but home. I canceled plans with friends because I was embarrassed by the state of my apartment and exhausted from the constant tension. One night, after finding Stephanie had used my expensive face serum and emptied the bottle, I broke down in tears in my bathroom. I called Laura, who had become my lifeline through this ordeal. "I cannot do this anymore," I sobbed. "It's like I'm a guest in my own home. My parents won't listen. Stephanie won't change. I feel trapped. Have you considered looking for another apartment?" Laura suggested gently. "On such short notice, and at current market rates. My parents charge me about 30% below market for this place. I can't afford something comparable on my own." "Maybe not comparable," Laura acknowledged, "but something that is yours, where you make the rules. Is your sanity worth the price difference?" As I looked around at my once peaceful sanctuary, now completely overtaken by Stephanie's presence, I realized Laura might be right. But before I could seriously consider that option, things would take an even more dramatic turn. Exactly 1 month after Stephanie moved in, I received a call from my father while I was at work. His tone was unusually formal, almost businesslike. "Allison, your mother and I would like to have a family discussion this evening. It's important that both you and Stephanie are present. We will come by around 7 p.m. A sense of dread settled in my stomach. "What is this about, Dad?" "We will discuss everything tonight," he replied cryptically before hanging up. I spent the rest of the workday distracted, running through possible scenarios. Were they going to take Stephanie back to their house? Had they found her an apartment? Or was this about something else entirely? By the time I arrived home, Stephanie had tidied up the apartment, a first since her arrival. She seemed unusually quiet and kept checking her phone. "Do you know what this meeting is about?" I asked, suspicion growing. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Not really. Dad just said they wanted to talk to us both." At precisely 7 p.m., our parents arrived. Mom brought a casserole so we wouldn't have to worry about dinner. Dad carried a folder that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. We sat around my small dining table, the one I had found at a flea market and lovingly restored. My mother served the casserole while my father cleared his throat and opened the folder. "Allison, as you know, your sister has been staying with you for the past month. Given that the living arrangement appears to be working out, we need to make some adjustments to your rental agreement." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "What kind of adjustments?" My father slid a paper across the table. "We will need to increase your rent, starting next month. The new amount will be double what you are currently paying." I nearly choked. "Double? Why would you double my rent?" "Well, there are 2 people living in the apartment now," my mother chimed in, as if this explained everything. "That means twice the utilities, twice the wear and tear on the property." "But Stephanie isn't paying anything," I pointed out, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "She doesn't have a job. Which is exactly why we need to adjust your rent," my father explained with that patient tone he used when he thought I was being obtuse. "We need to cover the additional expenses Stephanie incurs while she is getting back on her feet." I looked at Stephanie, who was studying her plate intently, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She had known. Of course, she had known. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You want me to pay double rent to cover Stephanie living here? Even though I didn't invite her, even though I didn't have space for her, and am already dealing with increased costs and disruption to my life?" "Now Allison," my mother said, her voice taking on that warning tone I knew well from childhood. "Stephanie is family. Families support each other during difficult times. Then why is the support always one-directional?" I asked. "Why am I always the one expected to give while Stephanie only takes?" My father frowned. "That is unfair, Allison. Your sister has had some bad luck recently." "Bad luck, or bad choices?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. The table fell silent. Stephanie's eyes welled with tears on cue, a talent she had perfected over the years. "I cannot believe you would say something so cruel." My mother scolded, "After everything we have done for you, giving you this beautiful apartment at below market rent for years." "I have paid rent faithfully every month," I countered. "I have maintained the apartment, improved it. This was a business arrangement that benefited both parties." "And now the arrangement is changing," my father said firmly. "The new rent will be effective from the 1st of next month. That gives you 2 weeks to adjust your budget." I looked down at the paper he had slid across the table. The new amount would eat up nearly 70% of my monthly income after taxes. It would destroy my savings plan and make it impossible to maintain my current lifestyle. "I cannot afford this," I said simply. "Not on my current salary." "Then perhaps you should look for a better paying job," my father suggested. Or take on some freelance work. You're always talking about those side hustles people do nowadays. The casualness with which he dismissed my financial reality made something snap inside me. Years of always being the responsible one, of watching Stephanie receive endless second chances while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition, culminated in this moment. Or, I said, my voice steady despite the anger and hurt swirling inside me, I could just move out. There was a moment of silence before all three of them burst into laughter. Move out to where? My mother asked between chuckles. Do you have any idea what rental prices are like right now? You wouldn't find anything close to what you have here, even at the increased rate, my father added confidently. Your whole life is here, Stephanie chimed in. All your stuff, your routine. You wouldn't really leave. Their dismissive laughter felt like a slap in the face. They truly believed I was trapped, that I had no choice but to accept whatever terms they dictated. Perhaps worse, they thought I lacked the courage to strike out on my own. I'll start looking for a new place tomorrow, I said quietly. My father waved his hand dismissively. Allison, don't be dramatic. Just sign the new agreement and we can all enjoy this lovely dinner your mother made. I took the pen he offered and held it over the paper for a long moment. Then I set it down without signing. I'll let you know my decision by the end of the week, I said. The rest of the dinner passed in an uncomfortable conversation, mostly between my parents and Stephanie about her plans to find herself and explore new career paths. I remained silent, a storm of emotions and thoughts churning inside me. After they left, Stephanie tried to act as if nothing had happened, turning on the television and settling into her usual spot on my sofa. They're right, you know, she said casually. You wouldn't really move out. This place is too perfect, and you hate change. In that moment, looking at her lounging on my furniture, using my Netflix account, eating my food, and speaking with such entitled certainty, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about the rent increase. This was about respect, boundaries, and standing up for myself in a family dynamic that had been broken for far too long. I went to bed without responding, but I lay awake for hours, my mind racing with possibilities and plans. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next day, I called in sick to work for the first time in over a year. As soon as Stephanie left for her daily coffee shop visit, where she claimed to be networking but really just spent hours scrolling social media, I sat down at my dining table with my laptop and a notebook. First, I assessed my financial situation. I had been saving 20% of my income consistently for the past 3 years. While it wasn't enough for a down payment on a home yet, it was a substantial emergency fund that could cover first and last month's rent, security deposit, and moving expenses if necessary. I calculated my maximum affordable rent based on the standard guideline of spending no more than 30% of my income on housing. The number was sobering, significantly less than what I currently paid, even before the proposed increase, which meant I would need to make compromises on location, size, or amenities. Next, I reached out to 3 real estate agents specializing in rentals. I was honest about my budget constraints and timeline, explaining that I needed to move within 2 weeks. 2 of them were doubtful but promised to see what they could find. The third, a woman named Vanessa, was more optimistic. The market is tight, but not impossible, she assured me. Especially if you're willing to consider neighborhoods a bit further from downtown or slightly smaller spaces. While waiting for the agents to get back to me, I turned my attention to my current lease agreement. I pulled out the document from my filing cabinet and read it carefully, something I admittedly should have done more thoroughly before signing. To my surprise and relief, there was no minimum lease term specified. After the initial 1-year period, which had long since passed, I was effectively on a month-to-month arrangement with a required 30 days notice to vacate. More importantly, there was no clause about the furniture or fixtures in the apartment. Everything I had purchased over the years was legally mine to take, from the sofa to the refrigerator. My parents had provided only the basic built-in appliances like the stove and dishwasher. Still, I wanted to be certain. I texted Laura, whose brother was a real estate attorney. Can you ask Kyle a hypothetical legal question about tenant rights and furniture ownership? Laura called me back 20 minutes later. Kyle says that unless specifically stated in the lease, any furniture you purchase belongs to you, regardless of who owns the building. He also said that if your parents try to claim otherwise without documentation, they wouldn't have a case. Armed with this knowledge, I felt more confident moving forward. By the end of the day, Vanessa had sent me listings for 5 potential apartments. All were smaller than my current place, and none had the same charm or character, but they were within my budget and available immediately. The following day, I took another personal day and toured all 5 properties. The first 3 were non-starters, either in poor condition or in locations that would make my commute unbearable. The 4th had potential but was at the absolute top of my budget with no room for negotiation. The fifth apartment was the smallest, at just 500 square feet, but it had been recently renovated with new flooring and appliances. It was in a secure building with on-site laundry, and though it was 15 minutes further from my office, it was near a direct bus line. Most importantly, the landlord was willing to work with my tight timeline and offered a slight discount on the security deposit if I could move in within 10 days. I signed the lease on the spot, putting down a deposit with my credit card and scheduling a final walkthrough for the following week. As I left the building, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. I had just committed to a complete upheaval of my life in the span of 48 hours. Back at my soon-to-be former apartment, I began planning the logistics of the move. I created a detailed inventory of everything I owned, separating items into categories: must take, could sell, could donate. I researched moving companies and was dismayed by the quotes I received for such short notice. Even the smallest truck with minimal assistance would cost nearly $1,000. That evening, as Stephanie chatted on the phone with a friend about an upcoming party, completely oblivious to my planning, I reached out to my circle of friends. Within hours, I had assembled a volunteer moving crew of 6 people with 2 pickup trucks and an SUV. Laura offered her garage for temporary storage if needed, and her boyfriend, who worked as a contractor, volunteered to help disassemble and reassemble furniture. The final piece of my plan involved timing. I checked my parents' social media and confirmed what I had suspected. My mother had been posting about an upcoming family reunion at my aunt's house that weekend, a 3-hour drive away. They had been talking about it for months, and I had already declined the invitation, citing work commitments. Stephanie, always eager for family attention, had confirmed her attendance. This gave me the perfect opportunity. My parents and Stephanie would be gone from Friday evening until Sunday afternoon. I scheduled the move for Saturday, giving us a full day to empty the apartment of everything I owned. As the plan came together, I felt a growing sense of resolve. This was not just about escaping an unfair financial situation. It was about finally standing up for myself and changing a family dynamic that had been unhealthy for far too long. The night before my parents' planned ultimatum meeting, where they expected me to sign the new rental agreement, I texted my father, *I have made my decision about the apartment. I will discuss it with you when you return from Aunt Jean's on Sunday, *. He responded immediately, *. We need to resolve this before the weekend, Allison. Your mother and I expect you to be reasonable about this, *. I didn't reply. For once, I would not be following their script. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparations. I arranged for my mail to be forwarded, scheduled utility transfers, and packed essential items discreetly while Stephanie was out. I withdrew cash for last-minute expenses and thanked my past self for maintaining meticulous records of purchases, complete with receipts for most major items stored in a cloud drive. By Friday evening, as I watched Stephanie pack an overnight bag for the family reunion, I felt an odd sense of calm. She had no idea that when she returned, the apartment would be transformed, and with it, our relationship. "Are you sure you won't come?" she asked as she headed out the door. "Mom says Aunt Jean really wants to see you." "I have too much work to catch up on," I replied truthfully, though not for the reasons she assumed. "Have a good time." As her ride share pulled away, I looked around the apartment that had been my home for 5 years. By this time tomorrow, it would look very different, and so would my life. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, as if the universe was approving of my decision. I had barely slept, a combination of anxiety and adrenaline keeping me alert through the night. By 6 a.m., I was already sorting through the final items in my closet when my phone buzzed with a text from Laura. Operation Independence Day is a go. Troops arriving at 0800 hours, I smiled at her attempt to lighten the mood with military jargon. By 7:30, I had dismantled my bed frame and was working on emptying my dresser when the first knock came at the door. Laura arrived with coffee and bagels, followed closely by her boyfriend Marcus with his toolkit. Within the hour, the rest of my volunteer crew had assembled. "Okay, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "Thank you all so much for helping today. The plan is to have everything out by 4 p.m. The big furniture goes first, then boxes, then all the small loose items." We worked with surprising efficiency. Marcus and his friend took charge of disassembling the larger furniture pieces, while Laura and 2 other friends formed a box brigade from the apartment to the vehicles. I moved between groups, directing traffic and making decisions about what went where. By noon, my bedroom was completely empty. The kitchen was half-packed, and the living room furniture was ready for transport. We broke for a quick lunch of delivered sandwiches, everyone sitting on the floor in a circle since all the seating had been removed. "How are you feeling?" Laura asked quietly while the others chatted. I considered the question carefully, sad, angry, relieved, proud, all of it at once. She squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing. This is long overdue." The afternoon continued at the same pace. We made 3 trips to my new apartment, carefully arranging furniture and stacking boxes in the much smaller space. My new landlord seemed surprised by the efficiency of our operation but was impressed by our organization. "Most move-ins I see are complete chaos," he commented as he helped hold a door open for us. "You folks have a system." By 3:30, we were down to the final items. The apartment that had been so carefully furnished now stood eerily empty. The built-in appliances remained, along with the window blinds that had come with the place. Everything else, from the shower curtain to the light bulbs and the lamps, was mine and had been packed away. I did a final walkthrough, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything in cabinets or closets. In the kitchen, I left an envelope on the counter containing my keys, the next month's rent check as required by my 30-day notice, and a brief letter explaining my decision. The letter was factual and unemotional, simply stating that I was exercising my right to terminate the rental agreement with proper notice and that I had taken only the possessions that belonged to me. As I stood in the empty living room for the last time, Laura put her arm around my shoulders. "Ready?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. With one final look, I closed and locked the door behind me. The reaction came sooner than I expected. We had just finished the final trip to my new apartment and were celebrating with pizza and beer when my phone exploded with notifications. First came a series of texts from Stephanie, "What the hell, Allison? Where is all the furniture? Where am I supposed to sleep? Mom and Dad are furious, *. Then came the phone calls. My mother first, then my father, then my mother again. I let them all go to voicemail, needing time to compose myself before the confrontation. When I finally listened to the messages, my mother's voice was nearly hysterical. "Allison. What have you done? We came home to find the apartment completely empty. Is this some kind of joke? Call me immediately." My father's message was colder, more threatening. "This is completely unacceptable behavior, Allison. That furniture belongs in that apartment. You have violated your lease agreement. Call me back now before I have to take legal action." I waited until my friends had left, thanking them profusely for their help, before I finally called my father back. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger when he answered. "Explain yourself," he demanded without preamble. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "I decided to move out, as I told you I might. I gave proper notice as required by the lease, paid the final month's rent, and took my belongings with me." "Your belongings?" he sputtered. "That furniture belongs in the apartment." "Actually, no," I replied calmly. "Every piece of furniture in that apartment was purchased by me with my own money. I have receipts for everything if you would like to see them. The lease makes no mention of any furnishings provided by the landlord, which would be you and Mom." There was a moment of stunned silence before he recovered. "This is not about legalities, Allison. This is about your sister having nowhere to sleep tonight. The apartment is completely empty. There are air mattresses at Target for under $50, I suggested. Or she could stay at your house. The guest room renovations must be finished by now, right?" Another silence, longer this time. I realized with sudden clarity that there probably had never been any renovations. It had been an excuse, nothing more. "Where are you?" he finally asked. "I have a new apartment," I said, not volunteering the address. "It's smaller, but it's mine." "This is not over," he warned. "Your mother is beside herself. Stephanie is crying. Is that what you wanted? To hurt your family?" The guilt trip almost worked. Almost. But I held firm. "What I wanted was to be treated with respect," I replied evenly. "What I wanted was for my boundaries to be acknowledged. What I wanted was to not have my kindness taken for granted. So this is what, revenge? Some kind of childish tantrum because we asked you to help your sister?" "No, Dad. This is me making a choice about my own life. I paid rent for the final 30 days as required. Stephanie can stay there if she wants, but she will need to get her own furniture." I heard my mother's voice in the background demanding the phone. There was a rustling sound, and then her tear-filled voice came through. "How could you do this to your sister, to us? After everything we have done for you?" "Mom," I said gently. "I have done nothing wrong. I simply moved out of an apartment that was no longer working for me, taking my own possessions with me. But where is Stephanie supposed to sleep? There is nothing left. The same place she would have slept if I had never lived there in the first place. The apartment was unfurnished when I moved in. Remember?" That simple fact seemed to stop her short. There was a long pause before she spoke again. Her voice was different now. "You really moved everything out in one day?" "Yes." "And you have a new place already? You planned all this?" "Yes." Another pause. I never thought you would actually leave. There was something in her tone. Not quite respect, but perhaps the beginnings of it. A recognition that I was not the same pushover they had always assumed me to be. The conversation ended shortly after with vague threats about discussions to come and decisions to be made. I hung up, feeling drained, but strangely peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I had drawn a line and held it, despite the emotional manipulation and guilt trips that had always worked in the past. Later that evening, I received a surprising text from my father. Asterisk, the apartment looks different, empty. I had forgotten what it looked like before you moved in. We will talk more tomorrow. Asterisk, it was not an apology, not even close, but it was an acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. In the weeks that followed my dramatic departure, I adjusted to life in my new apartment. The space was indeed much smaller, requiring creative organization and some difficult decisions about which possessions to keep. My king-sized bed dominated the bedroom, leaving barely enough space to walk around it. My beloved sectional sofa had to be split into its component pieces to fit the living area. My dining table now served double duty as a desk and eating surface. Yet, despite the constraints, there was a lightness to my new home that had nothing to do with square footage. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt truly in control of my space and my life. Every object was exactly where I wanted it. Every decision, from when to do laundry to what temperature to set the thermostat, was mine alone. The peace that came with this autonomy was worth far more than the extra space I had left behind. I introduced myself to my neighbors, something I had never bothered to do in my previous building. To my delight, the woman across the hall was a graphic designer who worked from home and invited me to join her for coffee on our shared rooftop garden. The older gentleman next door offered to water my plants when I traveled for work. Gradually, I built a small community in my new building, creating connections that felt genuine and supportive. Meanwhile, the situation with my family evolved in unexpected ways. Stephanie, faced with an empty apartment and no one to cater to her needs, found herself forced to make changes. According to my mother's reluctant updates, she had taken a part-time job at a local boutique, similar to her previous position. It was not much, but it was a start toward financial independence. My parents, after the initial shock and anger subsided, seemed to be going through a period of reflection. My father particularly appeared to be reconsidering his role in enabling Stephanie's dependence. During a brief phone conversation 2 weeks after my move, he asked questions about my new place without the judgment I had expected. "Are you managing okay with the budget?" he inquired, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes," I replied honestly. "It's tighter than before, but I'm making it work. The location is actually better for my commute, which saves on transportation costs." "That's good," he said awkwardly. "Your mother and I have been talking about Stephanie, about some patterns we might have encouraged over the years." It was as close to an acknowledgement of their favoritism as I had ever heard. And while it was not an apology, it felt like progress. My relationship with my mother remained strained. She continued to see my actions as a betrayal of family loyalty rather than a necessary step toward healthy boundaries. Our conversations were short and superficial, focusing on weather and work rather than the emotional elephant in the room. Stephanie, surprisingly, was the first to reach out in a meaningful way. A month after my departure, she texted, asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, curious about what she wanted, but determined to maintain my boundaries. We met at a neutral cafe halfway between our respective homes. She looked different somehow, with less makeup and simpler clothes than her usual stylish outfits. "So," she said after we had ordered our drinks, "your new place is good." "It is," I confirmed. "Different, but good." She nodded, fidgeting with her napkin. "I didn't think you would really leave." "None of us did." "You know," she admitted with a small smile, "it was kind of badass, actually. The look on Dad's face when we walked into that empty apartment. I wish I had taken a picture." Despite myself, I laughed. "It wasn't about revenge, you know." "I know that now." She looked down at her coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about how I've always expected people to take care of me. How I never really had to face consequences because someone always bailed me out." I remained silent, letting her continue at her own pace. "When you left, it was like suddenly I had to figure things out. Mom and Dad brought over an air mattress, but it was uncomfortable, and I hated it. So I got a job to buy my own bed. And once I started working again, I realized I actually like having my own money, not having to ask for everything." "That's great, Steph," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "I'm still staying at the apartment," she added quickly. "But I'm paying rent now. Not much, but something. And I'm looking for a roommate situation for when the lease ends." We talked for nearly 2 hours, longer than we had spoken in years. For the first time, it felt like a conversation between equals, rather than the familiar dynamic of her taking and me giving. As we parted, she hugged me awkwardly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for being such a terrible sister." "You weren't terrible," I corrected her. "We just had unhealthy patterns, all of us." The healing process with my family continued slowly over the following months. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. My mother still occasionally tried to make me feel guilty for abandoning Stephanie. My father still sometimes slipped into his authoritative role, dispensing unwanted advice about my finances or career. But something fundamental had changed. They could no longer assume my compliance or take my support for granted. Each interaction required mutual respect, or it simply did not happen. I declined invitations that felt like obligations and accepted only those that felt genuine. I offered help when I could do so without resentment and said no when I could not. 6 months after my move, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my parents' house. The atmosphere was different, tentative, but not unpleasant. Stephanie brought a dessert she had baked herself. I brought a bottle of wine I could genuinely afford. My father carved the turkey with less ceremony than usual, and my mother asked about my new neighbors with what seemed like genuine interest. As we ate, I looked around the table at these people who had shaped me in both positive and negative ways. I felt neither the resentment that had driven me away, nor the desperate need for approval that had kept me compliant for so long. Instead, I felt a calm acceptance, a recognition that we were all flawed individuals doing our best with the emotional tools we had. The greatest lesson I learned through this experience was not about furniture or apartments or even money. It was about the difference between love and enabling, between generosity and being taken advantage of. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to set clear boundaries and hold them firm, even when it is painful. I also discovered the value of true independence, not just financial but emotional. The security of knowing I could stand on my own, make difficult decisions, and navigate their consequences gave me a confidence that permeated every aspect of my life. My work improved, my friendships deepened, and my sense of self strengthened. Today, 1 year after that dramatic moving day, I sit in my small but cherished apartment, surrounded by the same furniture that once filled a larger space, but now feels perfectly right for where I am. I have added new pieces chosen specifically for this home and let go of others that no longer served me. In many ways, that is what the entire experience taught me about life. We hold on to relationships, patterns, and expectations that once fit but may have become uncomfortable or constraining. Having the courage to assess what truly serves us, to keep what nurtures our growth, and release what restricts, it is perhaps the most important skill we can develop. If you have ever found yourself in a situation where your kindness was mistaken for weakness, where your boundaries were repeatedly crossed, or where you felt trapped by others' expectations, know that you have the right and the power to change that dynamic. It may not be easy, and it may not happen overnight, but taking that first step toward honoring your own needs can transform not just your life, but the lives of those around you in ways you might never expect.